All right, today we're diving into something pretty intense. It's a public appeal from a tenured professor at San Jose State University. And let me tell you, he lays out a story of, well, betrayal, what he calls an institutional conspiracy, and a really desperate demand for justice.
Okay, get a load of this quote. I am not merely facing an academic institution. I am facing a union of ruin and destruction. Whoa. Right off the bat, Professor Fayad is making it crystal clear that this isn't just some run-of-the-mill workplace dispute. He sees this as a fight against something powerful and, in his words, destructive.
So who is the person behind these powerful words? That would be Professor Mohamed Ibrahim Fayad. And the document we're unpacking today is what he calls the Fourth Outcry. It's basically his public case against San Jose State University, and, maybe even more importantly, against his own faculty union.
Okay, so let's get into it. To really get a handle on his complaint, you first have to understand where he's coming from, how he sees himself, and his place in all of this. And this is really fascinating. In his writing, he doesn't just see himself as a professor. He frames his identity as a descendant of a culture that created guilds over 1,200 years ago. These ancient systems for mutual protection and support. And that idea of solidarity, it's absolutely central to this story. You have to keep that in mind to understand why he feels so deeply betrayed.
And in his eyes, that long tradition has just been shattered. He alleges that San Jose State University is no longer this sanctuary of higher learning. Instead, he claims it's become this place run by bureaucrats, a system that, in his view, actively sidelines its best and brightest faculty. Which brings us to what he calls the Union of Ruin. This is his primary target. We're talking about the California Faculty Association, or CFA, the very organization that he says should have been his #1 defender.
And this comparison really gets to the core of his argument. You see it right here. On one side, what a union is supposed to be, a shield, a fortress, right? But on the other side, you have what he claims the CFA actually is, a dagger, an accomplice in his downfall, a bastion of betrayal. That contrast, that's everything. That's the heart of his entire outcry.
And he doesn't stop there. He claims that the union's own bylaws, the very rules meant to protect people like him, are being twisted and used against them. He alleges that these vague phrases like unprofessional conduct aren't being used as a guideline for behavior, but as, in his words, legal snares to trap and silence anyone who speaks out.
And then there's the money. This is a huge point for him. He states he's paid something like $27,000 in union dues throughout his career. So from his perspective, his own money was used to pay for the union's silence, or worse, their complicity in what he calls his own character assassination. It's a bitter pill to swallow.
Now, his accusations don't just end with the union. He really widens the net here, alleging that he's up against what he calls a sinister institutional cartel. In his document, he literally provides a map of villains. It's a list. He names names, specific administrators at the university. But it gets even wider. He even alleges the big corporate interests like IBM are somehow part of this conspiracy against him. So you have to ask, what's the alleged motive here? Why would they do this? Well, according to his outcry, it had nothing to do with his performance. In fact, he claims it was the opposite. He alleges his own achievements were so significant that they were terrifying to others. And that's what triggered this, in his words, scorched earth campaign of racism to push him out. Okay, so let's talk about the alleged fallout from all of this. He uses a really strong term for it, total liquidation. So what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, for starters, the money. According to his document, as a senior tenured professor, his monthly salary was $10,000. The kind of stability you work your whole career for.
And then, boom, he claims his salary was slashed all the way down to just $2,000 a month. That's an 80% pay cut. He calls it nothing less than a despicable attempt to break his pride. And it goes way beyond just the financial hit. He alleges the consequences became a matter of life and death. He claims they took away his health insurance, which he says cut him off from life-saving medications. That takes this to a whole different level. The language he uses to describe his sense of betrayal, it's just incredibly intense. He claims the union didn't just stand by and do nothing. He frames them as being a primary partner in his suffering, metaphorically drinking his blood. It's powerful, raw stuff. So after laying all of this out, all these grievances, all this pain, what does he actually want? What is he demanding? That brings us to his call for justice. And his demands are very clear, very direct. First, he wants full and unconditional restitution, all his financial and professional rights back. Second, he wants accountability for every single person on his map of villains. Third, he wants the Union of Ruin exposed for its alleged complicity. And finally, he's demanding comprehensive compensation for what he describes as psychological and professional devastation.
And he's really clear about one thing. This is not about feeling sorry for him. At 75 years old, he says it himself. I seek no one's pity. What he wants, he says, is swift justice.
And he wraps up his entire document with this direct challenge, not just to the university, but to us, to the public. He says, your silence in the face of this brutality is a bullet in the heart of justice. He's basically arguing that staying silent is the same as being complicit, forcing anyone who hears his story to really think about it.
So that's where we land after unpacking Professor Fayad's outcry. It's a powerful, incredibly detailed account from one man's perspective, an allegation of total institutional failure and personal ruin. And of course, it's crucial to remember this is his side of the story. But it leaves us with a really big, fundamental question. When the institutions that are supposed to protect you don't, or, as he alleges, turn against you, where do you even go for help?